Thank you for joining us tonight on another episode of The Racing Report. My name is Rob Peeters, and I am your host once again for another fabulous little half hour where we are going to talk all things motorsports, because we had no shortage of action in the world of NASCAR this last weekend in Talladega. We had the Cup Series, the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, and the ARCA Series, and surprisingly enough, we had first-time winners in all three series. How about that? Didn't expect that. But not only that, we have a lot of other news on tap for today's show, and we're going to go ahead and get right on into that right now. And we're going to begin, as always, of course, with the world of Formula One, because there's no shortage of news with Formula One now coming back this weekend for the Miami Grand Prix. Now, the biggest news, of course, broke last weekend, and we learned that the Turkish Grand Prix will return to the Formula One calendar in 2027, with the series returning to Istanbul Park for the first time since 2021. The track and the series have signed a long-term contract to keep the race on the calendar for 5 years, with an option to also extend it to at least the 2033 season. So this is a big update to something we talked about a couple of weeks ago, about how possibly F1 could be returning to Istanbul Park in Turkey, and now it has been made official. We do know that indeed Formula One, the Turkish Grand Prix, will be back next year in 2027. And on top of that, we got some big news for Audi F1. Former Formula One driver and three-time winner of the 24 Hours of Le Mans, Alan McNish, has been named Audi F1 team's racing director. Now, McNish will be responsible for all trackside operations, taking over some of the workload from the recently departed team principal Jonathan Wheatley. So this is an update to a story that we've been bringing you for the past several weeks regarding how Audi F1 team is even operating and who's the team principal, who's the leader. Well, now we know that it's Alan McNish. Arguably, I can't think of a more perfect pairing, in my opinion. McNish won, like I said, 3 Le Mans 24 hours with Audi, and he's been an important ambassador. He's also a former Formula One driver himself, so it's kind of neat to see him in this role, though I don't really know how successful it's going to be, but that's just something we'll have to wait and see. And of course, Formula One is back this weekend for the first time in about a month, so hey, anything can happen. We got a lot of changes coming up. But speaking of, the last piece of Formula One news that we are going to talk about today is about Fernando Alonso. Now, during the historic Grand Prix of Monaco, which happened not too long ago, Alonso reportedly said that he feels motivated and does not plan on retiring anytime soon. He said that, quote, time will tell, and that he still doesn't feel like that time has come yet. So for all of you Alonso fans hoping that he sticks around for another couple of years, looks like you're in luck. Doesn't seem like Alonso is going to be retiring from Formula One anytime soon. But again, things could potentially change depending on what Aston Martin does. Aston Martin could look at the end of this season and say, hey, we need to revamp the whole lineup, or they could say, let's stick with the status quo. Who knows? We'll find out, but right now Alonso saying, at the very least, he's not ready to step away on his own terms, so that's something big to keep in mind. But on that note, let's go ahead now and transition into the world of IndyCar, because we've got a lot to talk about this week. Tons of developing stories and tons of Indianapolis 500 related news that we've got to discuss. And the first one is a big one. So IndyCar has finalized a rule change that says that non-chartered entries will no longer be able to enter races outside of the Indianapolis 500. Now, this means that unless a team possesses an IndyCar charter, they're only permitted to enter the Indy 500, which is a stark contrast of the way things have been done for the past several decades. In all honesty, anybody's been able to come and participate in the Indianapolis 500, albeit sans for the 8 years at the start of the split. But either way, Penske Entertainment now says that it will expand to cover 27 cars under that. So 27 cars will be allowed to enter next year, but that's because 2 additional charters are being given to Chevrolet and Honda to run those factory entries. We already know that it's incredibly likely that, or if not has already been confirmed, that Meyer-Shank Racing will be entering co-fielding an entry with Honda next season, as Honda uses that charter. Meanwhile, we haven't really heard what Chevrolet is going to use that charter for, so maybe we could see some things up in the air. But right now, teams are going to be capped at 27 entries, chartered entries. So if you want to enter another car next year, you only can do it in the Indianapolis 500. Now, a note was included to the teams that says Penske Entertainment, quote, reserves the right to fill the car field for the race in the best interest of the sport if the grid falls below 25 next year or below 27 in 2028. This also essentially ends any hope that Prema will come back, because they will be barred from competing full-time next season. So it looks like that all of that buildup, all of that thought that, hey, maybe Prema's going to be able to find a buyer, maybe Prema's going to be able to enter some races later this year, is pretty much washed up, because who's going to want to buy into a team now that can't technically race next year outside of the Indy 500? Now, of course, the Indy 500 is still a big event. It's still one of the main sponsored magnets, I should say, in the series, but also there's plenty of teams that would like to run full-time that now unfortunately will not be able to do so unless they're able to buy a charter from one of the other 10 chartered teams. And that is the biggest development right now, and my feelings on it are complicated. It's one of those things where, yeah, okay, I can rationalize it. I can see why that they did this, but in my heart, that doesn't necessarily make me feel personally like it's right. But again, maybe this does help the health of the series, but in general, it also does seem like kind of a bad move, given how NASCAR just went through a lawsuit regarding charters. Now, obviously, the circumstances are much different, but my worry is that it would open up something like this in the long term, especially now since you pretty much closed it off to anybody who wants to get into IndyCar, saying that there's now a finite number of entries that you can run. And I just don't know if that's right, but again, we'll see. It definitely seems like they have this plan to keep this field at 27 cars going forward, especially next year and the year after that. So we'll have to see how this all plays out. But either way, some very big, substantial news in the world of IndyCar. Speaking of, though, the Indianapolis 500, Catherine Legg, as we've been talking about the last couple of weeks, has been officially confirmed as the 33rd entry to the Indy 500. She will pilot the number 11 Elf Cosmetics Chevrolet for AJ Foyt Racing, with a partnership with HMD Motorsports. So that's a big difference there. HMD partnering with AJ Foyt Racing for this entry. And that's not the only partnership. There's actually a couple of more that we should talk about. Arrow McLaren and Legacy Motor Club, yes, the NASCAR team run by Jimmy Johnson, have partnered up to co-enter Ryan Hunter-Reay's car in this year's Indianapolis 500. They'll be bringing some sponsorship over as well, sharing technical alliances and insights, which I don't know how much there is between NASCAR and IndyCar, but either way, there's a partnership there. Tony Kanaan has basically said they're here to win it, and they're basically giving it their all with RHR's entry. So definitely it'll be interesting to see when we finally get to the first laps on the big oval during practice coming up here in a couple of weeks' time in Indianapolis. It's only a couple of weeks away. We've got the Grand Prix coming up in a couple of weeks too. First cars are on the track. They've already been on the track for the open test, so lots to look forward to as the month of May is officially here. Speaking of, we've got that second partnership that we talked about. Juncos Hollinger Racing and Dreyer Reinbold Racing have partnered to become co-entrants and technical allies on Renus VK's number 76 Chevrolet in the Indianapolis 500. So again, sponsorship will be shared. Alliance has been developed, so a lot more teams working together in this year's Indianapolis 500 than perhaps before. And speaking of that open test that happened this week, Connor Daly was the quickest on the first day of the test with a 225.394 mile per hour average. Meanwhile, Kyle Collette topped the speed charts on the second day. Rookie Kyle Collette, not forget that. He had a 226.381 mile per hour average, though that was done in a tow. And now, as we wrap up the IndyCar news, let's talk about some very big, shocking news in the world of Formula E. Jaguar TCS Racing has announced that Mitch Evans will leave the team at the conclusion of this season after 10 years and 15 race victories. Now, the race is reporting that Evans is expected to join Nick Cassidy at the new Opel team next year, and the race is also reporting that Jaguar is apparently looking at tapping Stoffel Van Dorn to come back to Formula E and replace Mitch Evans in their one of their cars for next season. So, some big bombshell Formula E news that we get before the series also returns after about a month off, coming up this weekend in Berlin. But that is it for the open wheel news of the week. Let's go ahead and take our first break now of the show. And when we come back, we'll break down some of the news in Supercars as well as some of the biggest news in the world of NASCAR. So don't miss it. More Racing Report coming up after this. And welcome back to the Racing Report. My name is Rob Peeters. Thanks again so much for sticking with us through that break. We really appreciate it. As we teased before we went to commercial, we do have some Supercars news to discuss because Matt Stone Racing has announced that Aaron Seaton will co-drive with Zach Bates in the Enduro Cup while also making a wildcard start at Queensland Raceway coming up later on this summer. Now, if you're not familiar with him, he actually finished 15th in last year's Bathurst 1000, also driving for MSR and co-driving with Cameron Crick. So there's your news there in the world of Supercars. Still got, a little bit until we're going to go back to racing in Supercars. Of course, that championship is heading down to Tasmania after this. They've got still, like I said, a couple of weeks before they do that. Now let's move into the world of NASCAR because there's no shortage of it this week. We learned this weekend that Jim France has stepped down as CEO of NASCAR, but he will remain as the chairman of the board. Meanwhile, and as a result of that, Steve O'Donnell has been promoted to the NASCAR CEO effective last Saturday, April 25th. Now, in addition to that, lots more shakeups. Ben Kennedy has been promoted to the COO of NASCAR. And Julie Guise, the former track president at Phoenix and the previous leader of the Chicago Street Race, will now oversee the 2027 NASCAR schedule development. So lots of changes there. Obviously, Jim France stepping down from his position. He is 81, kind of makes sense. But like I said, he will remain on the board of directors as chairman of the board, and Steve O'Donnell taking his place effective immediately. So Steve O'Donnell, new CEO of NASCAR, Ben Kennedy, now the COO. Now in some lawsuit news, as we've been following the last couple of weeks, months really, of Spire Motorsports, Chris Gabehart, against Joe Gibbs Racing. A federal judge granted in part and denied a motion for a preliminary injunction filed by Joe Gibbs Racing against Chris Gabehart. The court determined that Gabehart improperly acquired JGR's confidential information before his departure. Now, the judge also concluded that these materials qualify as trade secrets. So that was a big development in this ruling. Additionally, the court upheld the enforceability of Gabehart's non-compete agreement, which now restricts him from performing similar duties for competing NASCAR teams for up to 18 months. So it could be a while before Spire actually gets Gabehart to perform the duties that they actually hired him to do. Now, however, the court did also deny Joe Gibbs Racing's request for an injunctive relief against Spire Motorsports, finding insufficient evidence that the team had acquired, used, or was likely to use Joe Gibbs Racing's trade secrets. So that is the update right now on the Chris Gabehart and Joe Gibbs Racing saga. But let's talk about some broadcasting news, because I don't know how some of you are going to feel about this. The CW and ESPN have entered into a partnership that will see CW sports events streamed through ESPN Unlimited. Now, if you don't know what ESPN Unlimited is, that's the new ESPN direct-to-consumer service that launched late last year. Basically, it gives you access to all of ESPN's linear channels, as well as access to ESPN Plus content and much more. Of course, it's all behind a paywall. Now, that's important because previously us NASCAR fans for the last year have been able to watch practice and qualifying on for free through the CW's app when we want to watch that for the O'Reilly Auto Parts series. Well, now this is going to unfortunately put that behind a paywall. And now, while you can access ESPN Unlimited with your cable provider, it's only certain cable providers. So if you are someone who has YouTube TV like myself, you can't access this right now unless you're paying $30 a month. Now, this is scheduled to launch later this summer. A tentative date has not yet been announced. We just know summer 2026 is when this is going to be going into effect. So just a heads up, that free practice and qualifying that you've been enjoying for the NASCAR O'Reilly Auto Parts series, unfortunately, is going to be behind a paywall in a couple months, a month, who knows, really, time. Just be prepared for that. Now into some of the driver team related news, not some of the crazier stuff, but Tyler Reddick has signed a contract extension with 23XI Racing that will keep him with the team for the indefinite future. Now, it's important to note also that terms of this new contract were not disclosed, so we don't know exactly how long Reddick is going to be with the team, but we do know that he is staying with them long term. Meanwhile, Kyle Busch is getting a new crew chief after just 10 races. Richard Childress Racing has announced that Jim Pullman will be replaced with Andy Street, who also crew chiefed for Kyle Busch at the latter half of last year, so it's kind of a reuniting, but that comes on the heels of Busch earning his first top 10 finish of the season this past weekend at Talladega. So, some big developments there. Maybe that'll help Kyle Busch. Hopefully, we'll see. I don't know. But definitely RCR seeing that, we might need to make a change here. Now, Colleague Racing has announced a couple more drivers for their free agent truck program. Clint Boyer is going to drive that number 25 Ram truck coming up at Dover later on next month. And Jamie McMurray will come out of retirement as well to drive that truck at the Coronado Naval Base, also coming up later on this summer. So 2 drivers we know for certain will be piloting that free agent truck coming up here in a couple of weeks' time and in a couple of months' time for the Colleague Racing Ram program. Final piece of NASCAR news, also Truck Series news. Corey Roper will be behind the wheel of the number 62 truck for Halmar Friesen Racing coming up this weekend at Texas. He'll have sponsorship from Dryden. Congratulations to Corey. Obviously, that's a big deal. And let's not forget that exact same truck won not long ago at Bristol. So, lots to talk about here in the world of NASCAR, but as a result of that, we're going to go ahead now and take our second and final break of the show. But when we come back, we're going to recap everything that happened and went down at Talladega, and we're also going to get you caught up on all of the racing that's coming up this weekend. And believe me, there's no shortage of it. You're going to want to stay tuned for that. So, more Racing Report coming up after this. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the Racing Report. My name is Rob Peeters. Thanks again so much for sticking with us through that break. Let's go ahead and break down everything that happened in the most recent weekend of racing. Of course, it was just really NASCAR that was in action, of course, and I'll tell you why it was just mainly NASCAR, but first let's talk about the ARCA race that happened on Saturday. A very fun race. A man by the name of Cletus McFarland came very close to winning that race. So did a woman by the name of Isabella Robusto. She also came very close to winning that race, but in the end, it was Andy Jankowiak who scored the victory on the last lap, coming to the checkered flag, beating both Cletus McFarland and Isabella Robusto to the line to score his first ever ARCA victory. That was a huge deal for him, although unfortunately he did get booed because it seemed like a lot of people probably wanted to see Cletus McFarland win a race, which I understand. I'm certain that there was a number of people who also wanted to see Isabella Robusto win her first career ARCA race, but in the end, like I said, Andy Jankowiak, the man who said not long ago saying that he would not lift until he saw God or the checkered flag, is now in victory lane, and it was just a great deal for him. Not a bad race either, all things considered. And later that afternoon, we also had the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series in Talladega. Not too bad of a race either. A much better race, in my opinion, at least, compared to the Cup Series race. But Corey Day ended up winning his first ever NASCAR O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race after taking the checkered flag and the caution flag at the end of that race. Some Pretty crazy accidents in that race, though no flips. Thankfully, we could say we went through an entire Talladega weekend without any cars getting upside down. That's either good or bad, depending on what kind of a fan you are. But in the end, also, like I said, in the Cup Series race, we had another first-time winner, and it was Carson Hocevar scoring the victory in a black number 77 Chevrolet. And he had probably one of the coolest celebrations after that race, where he hung out the side of his car, driving that, then doing a burnout while still hanging outside of his car. Just a really cool sight to behold. As of right now, NASCAR hasn't banned that celebration. Hopefully they don't. But it was a huge deal for Carson Hocevar, as he has finally scored his first ever Cup Series victory. And I felt like it was coming a long time. It was inevitable. It was going to come at some point. And now it happening at Talladega, I don't think could have been a more perfect way to draw it up. But I will say, though, the one thing about that Cup race in Talladega, the first stage, obviously being 98 laps long, did create for an interesting situation there. You kind of had, it's been a long time since you've had green flag pit stops and guys actually having to fuel save, but not fuel save in the way that I think we expected them to be, because we all knew when that first stage caution was coming out. We just didn't have a caution during the first stage. We just knew when it was going to end. And I think that created for some interesting situations where guys were kind of on the tail end of the lead lap and different guys were leading, and you just kind of saw different strategies playing out. But then by the second and third strategy stages, unfortunately, that was kind of all for naught, because they wadded them all up in the second stage, probably with one of the biggest crashes at Talladega in recent memory. And there's been a lot of big ones, but that one, it felt like took out darn near half, if not the whole field. But either way, still a fun weekend at Talladega, even if maybe the Cup Series product could have been just a slightly bit better. And then we talked about last week, we talked about how there was going to be a Super Formula race this week, but unfortunately it got canceled due to serious and heavy downpours at Autopolis. Now, series officials have said that they are looking to potentially replace that race in some way, but they don't know when that will happen. If it happens, though, it'll basically use the same qualifying and starting lineup that was supposed to be done at Autopolis. So they were able to get qualifying done, but the race was unfortunately just unfeasible due to heavy rain. And so if this race is replaced due to the cancellation, then like I said, they'll just line them up how they qualified this weekend, and we'll go from there. When that race is still TBD. If it even happens, is still TBA. So we'll monitor that for those Super Formula fans. But on that note, let's take a look at some of the races that are coming up this weekend. We've got, like I said, no shortage of action to look forward to. We've got Formula One back for the first time in about a month with the Miami Grand Prix. Now, of course, they're going to have Formula 2 there as well. They're going to have a sprint race weekend. It's going to be a big deal. It's going to be a lot. So that sprint race is going to be Saturday at noon Eastern time. And again, all of these are on Apple TV, so you're going to have to dust that off if you haven't opened it in about a month's time. And then the actual race for the Miami Grand Prix is scheduled at 4 p.m. Eastern time, so just be aware of that. It will be, again, like I said, on Apple TV. Formula 2 races obviously will not be on Apple TV. You'll have to have F1 TV activated with your Apple TV subscription in order to watch Colton Herta go out there and run at Miami. But on that note, let's also talk about the NASCAR weekend in Texas. We've got a packed one. The truck race is Friday at 8 o'clock Eastern time, while the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race is supposed to go green at 3:30 Eastern time on Saturday, with the Cup race scheduled also for 3:30 Eastern, though that is on Sunday. So some day races on the weekends, a nice Friday night truck race. Who doesn't love that coming up here this weekend for NASCAR in Texas? But then Formula E is also back after quite some time off. They're back at the Berlin Tempelhof Airport, probably one of the fan favorite races all year. They've got the first race set for Saturday at 10:05 Eastern, and then the second race is also going to be at 10:05 Eastern, but that's going to be on Sunday. And remember, both of those races will stream live on the Roku channel for free. So if you have access to the Roku channel, you don't even have to have a Roku. Like, you don't have to have an actual Roku stick or Roku TV. You could just download the Roku channel app on your Fire TV, your Apple TV, whatever kind of device you use, and even on your phone, and you'll be able to watch the race that way. So lots of different ways to watch the Formula E races this weekend, and of course they will also have practice and qualifying on the Roku channel as well. IMSA will be in Laguna Seca this weekend after couple weeks ago when they were in Long Beach. They're going to stick around in California. That race is set for 4 o'clock Eastern Time on Peacock and on NBCSN on Sunday. So if you have Peacock, great, you're set to go. If you don't, but you have YouTube TV, you're set to go because you'll have NBCSN on there. If you don't have either of those two things, might want to look into one way to get it because I don't think it's going to be on NBC. Meanwhile, some grassroots racing. We got USAC Midgets are in action this Friday. The Larry Rice Classic at Bloomington Speedway down here in Indiana. That's set for Friday at 6 o'clock Eastern Time. That will be aired, of course, on Flow Racing. Also in Indiana racing schedules, we got the Lucas Oil Late Models will be at Circle City Raceway Friday at 6:45 Eastern Time. That race will, of course, also stream live on Flow Racing. High Limit Sprint Cars are in Texas this weekend. I believe they've got a race set for Thursday, though by the time you're watching this, that race has already been done and dusted. But they also have another race coming up here on Saturday. And then ARCA East and West are both in action this weekend. So NASCAR, it's not just NASCAR. If you're looking for your stock car fix, there's plenty of it. The East Series is going to be in Nashville at 8:30 p.m. Eastern on Saturday, while the West Series is going to be in action at Shasta Speedway at 11:15 p.m. Eastern Time on Saturday. So that's it for this week's episode of the Racing Report. Thank you again so much for listening. And remember, if you like the show, please be sure to follow me on social media. You can do so by looking up at rpeeters33. That's RPEETERS33 on all your favorite social media platforms. And then make sure, as always, you've got that handy dandy little WTHR Plus app installed on your smart TV, because you don't want to miss a single episode of the Racing Report each and every week, especially going into the month of May. We're going to give you the most up-to-date news and notes from the world of IndyCar and from the Indianapolis 500. You won't want to miss a single moment of that. So, for WTHR Plus, my name is Rob Peeters, and this has been another episode of the Racing Report. We hope to see you next week. Everybody enjoy the races, and we'll see you next time.